Ed Kirby was the heart and soul not only of our Sharon Historical Society, but of our beloved town. He loved it as much as anyone ever could. You're going to hear shortly from three people who knew him well and were very close to him. His treasured colleague, Liz Shapiro, our first selectman, Brent Colley, and his longtime friend and sidekick, Barclay Prindle. But first, we have a little clip of video. Last September, along with Rhonda Schwartz and photographer Jonathan Duster, I had the honor of sitting down with Ed for our Voices of Sharon project. He talked about the things that he loved so much, his town, the history, his family, and baseball, of course. And we have all of this video in a long 55-minute video that we posted shortly on our YouTube channel. But for this morning's festivities, I thought it'd be nice to take a look as Ed talked with me about growing up in Sharon.
I was born in Sharon, in the Sharon Hospital, which was quite new then, but a lot smaller than it is now. But the section that I was born in is just about where just to the right of the entrance right now, where you go in.
What's your memory of growing up here as a child?
Oh, my memories are great. I was very fortunate in growing up on the Miles estate because Emily Winthrop Miles was sort of a mentor to me, and Corey Miles owned the North Canaan Airport, so I got a chance to fly real early and walk biplanes, and that was pretty exciting. But I lived a long way from town. It was almost 5 miles to the town hall from the Miles estate, so there weren't many kids around in the area that I was in. Those are all gravel roads. Usually plowed by the town within 5 or 6 days of a snowstorm, so getting in and out of there was kind of difficult, but Dad bought a Caterpillar tractor, which I still have. It's down in Kent at the antique machinery place, and that had a huge V plow on it, so when we didn't get plowed out, he would plow us all the way to Sharon. As I got older, I spent a lot of time in the woods. I really liked the woods, and when I got older, I could ride my bicycle to town, and I played baseball at the old Adams Field and things like that. So I wasn't isolated, but it was a little bit different way of growing up.
The most interesting people you met growing up, Emily Winthrop?
Emily Winthrop Miles?
Yeah.
Was she the most interesting? Yeah, well, she was my mentor actually, and even after when I was a kid, I used to walk around with her every place, and she didn't have any children, and there were hardly any kids around there, so I had a sister that was 3 years younger than me, but I spent a lot of time with her, and even after I was out of the service and in college, I'd be home on weekends, and I still worked there, and so I'd sit down at the dinner table with my overalls and everything on for lunch every day, and she was on a stricter diet, so she always wanted to borrow half of one of my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But she was, I used to play Scrabble with her, and I never won a game in all those years. She was a very smart woman. She was an amazing sculptress and an artist, and also a poet and a photographer, and
a rebel.
And a rebel in a way, yes, because she was not a Winthrop in action. She voted for Franklin D. Roosevelt all 4 times, and she gloried in that. She gave me a big thing. I still have it of the buttons you wear, and all Roosevelt buttons and things like that, including one that says "Win what with Wilkie."
Well, that was just a small clip and portion of the conversation we had with Ed, put together that very so nicely by Jonathan and Rhonda, and something I would recommend you watch. We're going to post it shortly on our YouTube site. Now we're going to hear from those who knew Ed so well and want to talk about him. And let's start with his treasured colleague and collaborator at the Historical Society, Liz Shapiro. Liz?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. I am really honored to be here today, and I was honored to be asked to be here. Mary, Mo, Patrick, all of you who are family members and friends of Ed, I want to express my deepest sympathy. I think when your father, husband, grandfather was a man larger than life, there are so many who share in your grief and in your loss, and I am definitely one of those. Chris asked me to speak about Ed and the Sharon Historical Society, and what I found is that it's very hard to separate my personal relationship with Ed from the work that we did together for so many years. And I think the reason is that most people who knew Ed professionally also knew Ed as a friend. So for me, it was impossible to do otherwise. And I think that was true for so many others. Ed Kirby was first and foremost a teacher, an educator. And once you understood that about him, so many other things fell right into place. Every idea he had, every project, every time I was herded into the Jeep for a tour of something or a visit to someone, it was because he wanted me to learn. He had so much information to share, and he believed passionately that our community would be better if they understood their history. From the very first, which was sometime, I think, way back in 1991, Ed made it crystal clear that I was expected to learn every part of the town of Sharon and all of its history, particularly that with that stuff about iron, if you remember. My memories of Ed always start with him pulling into the driveway, Jeep with the top off, walking very deliberately, which is how he walked into the building. Hello, Liz. I can't do it very well, but I can hear it. He always had a smile on his face and a smile in his voice. The very next thing that happened after the pleasantries was something along the lines of, and this is always, I've been thinking, or I've got an idea. The thing was, though, Ed's ideas were never just ideas. They were more like action items. They were going to happen. They had usually been percolating in his head for weeks, sometimes years. And this is how every project that we did together started. From the first book, Echoes of Iron, to Visions of Iron, the film version, and all 4 or 5 seldom told tales of Sharon. There were a lot of tales of Sharon. Not to mention the oral history program, the bus trips, the lecture series, the first Sharon Iron exhibit. There were a lot of projects. I would be remiss if I didn't mention what inevitably followed after Ed had shared his idea. And that is, he would turn to Marge Smith in the corner, who would have been listening intently and nodding through the conversation. And she would say, and Marge, this is going to sound familiar, Ed, I've got something to show you. They would walk back to the archives and disappear. And honestly, sometimes I forgot he was even there. I forgot both of them were there, except for the Jeep sitting in the parking lot. Eventually, they would either appear talking a mile a minute, or I would service from whatever I was doing and walk back, curious as to what they were up to. And again, inevitably, Marge and Ed had started at point A and ended at number 47. I swear I never saw two people who had more fun going down the rabbit hole together, searching for an elusive fact, something that one of them absolutely knew they had seen in the collection last week, last year. It didn't much matter. We were a pretty cool triangle. Ed and Marge went down the rabbit hole, discovered a treasure trove of stuff, and it was my job to make sure that their discoveries got translated out to the world. And it was a whole lot of fun. The last thing I'll say is that Ed had an ability to engage his audience, no matter if they were a group of old-time Sharon residents, second homeowners, unruly third graders, or teenage girls. And I know this because I have seen him put his magic spell on every audience imaginable. He was beloved by my 3 kids because he noticed them, talking to them at their level always, and understanding the importance to a child of recognizing them when they're with their peers. And he did this all the time. My oldest son, BJ, told me that after his class went on a field trip with Ed to the Miles Sanctuary, where Ed I guess, had made a comment in front of the class calling out BJ and making it clear that Ed had known BJ for a long time. And remember, BJ was probably 9 and Ed had known him for his entire life. BJ told me that when they were back on the bus on the way back to school, his classmates thought it was so cool that BJ knew Ed. And BJ was so proud of that. And that wasn't just BJ, that was every kid in every class that Ed spoke with or taught. He did that. He understood kids, and he understood the importance of making a kid feel special. And there is so much more I could say. But I've only been given up to 6 minutes, and I'm going to have to end somewhere. So I'm going to end with this. If you leave here today or in the next month or in the next years, missing Ed and wanting to hear his voice, not only do you have this wonderful interview that Brian has shown the clip of, which I hadn't seen, which really has moved me very much, but I would urge you to watch Visions of Iron, and I would urge you to watch it to the end. I'm not going to give anything away to those of you who have not had the privilege to see the film, but for those of you who did, you know what I'm talking about, I think. And that is what I know in my heart, and that Ed is going to get his wish, and he will be walking these beautiful hills for always. It's been my pleasure to be here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Liz. I know how much he valued your partnership at the Historical Society and your friendship. Let's turn now to our first selectman and longtime supporter of the Sharon Historical Society and former president and good friend of Ed Kirby, Brent Colley. Brent, good morning to you.
Good morning. No, thank you for all of you to be here. And it is an honor for me too to talk about Ed, my experiences with him. He was a big mentor for me, a role model, someone who I really came to admire for so many different reasons. The first time I met Ed was with Liz and Marge Smith. I had found these, what I thought were historic rock piles in the woods down the road from my house. And where I grew up in Reading, the rock piles tied to the Revolutionary War. So I was curious to know if maybe there was some connection in Sharon to that as well. Maybe it was a small encampment. Well, it turns out it was not anything like that. But it was a nice day to be with Liz and Marge and Ed. And I kind of got a mini geology lesson in the process, because that particular area where Westwoods 1 and 2 meets has some really neat rocks, and obviously Ed knows all about that. So that was my first meeting with Ed and Liz, and Liz is pretty smart. She set the hook kind of gently, but once the hook is set with Liz, like, you're not getting away. I mean, Steve knows that well. And that really led to a lot of interactions with Ed, because I quickly, became interested in what was Sharon and what was the region. And as I put the books here, a lot of the information that I wanted to, research was Ed's books. I mean, he kept on writing book after book after book. And as we all know, it's just fascinating to learn the town in the way that he wrote, and with Mary being the editor and Liz, the books between the words, the images, everything are good teaching tools. So I soaked all of that up. And the other thing that occurred to me in that time frame, which is 2007. So my daughter was just 3 years old. She only knew Ed as the man in the tractor, because every Memorial Day he'd have the tractor. And so the first time she saw him, that's the first thing she said was, "Oh, it's the man with the tractor." So I found that kind of funny. But in being involved with the society, I also learned that there was town and the town government, because a lot of the people at that time frame, and still are, were involved with town government. And I remember Mary coming to Ed one night at an event. "Come on, Ed, we have to go. Board of Finances started," or maybe Dr. Rael talking with Barkley about planning and zoning, and when the next meeting was. And then Liz with long range planning. So it kind of like sparked an interest in the town, and obviously, it's led to my involvement as well. The other thing that Ed did and was special to me, Mary too, he came up into my life in a time period that I was slowly losing my grandparents. And growing up, history tours and lessons and talks with, older generations. That was my life. I spent, most of the time in my grandparents' house, and all the friends would come over and they talk about times of the past, and we'd visit historical sites. And, I was losing that. But then as I came in 2007, 2008, really Ed and everyone involved in the Historical Society allowed that to come back to life. And I really, appreciate that on the emotional side. But, in terms of history, I just learned so much from Ed's history tours. And that's why, in the present day, I try to do the same for younger generations. So we take all the schools, whoever wants to go, to the locations that, Ed has taught about over the years. So that is something that always brings Ed to mind when, I'm giving these tours. I'm thinking about Ed, and you're right, Liz. You can hear his booming voice in your head. So, for me, Ed was a great role model. There's the way he conducted himself, the way he dressed, and his volunteerism and dedication to this town. I don't know if you can see behind me, but we weren't winning many trophies up until the present day, and because of baseball and Ed and our conversations about coaching and basically a lot of talk about kids in positions and figuring out what where to put a kid based on a certain skill set, or we had a lot of good conversations about that and baseball strategy. And it really paid off. It was one of the things that I truly enjoyed about spending time with him, because baseball was a big passion of his. And I'm happy that the town did honor Ed and Barkley for their long dedication to this town and volunteerism. I think the way I look at it is what I noted in the town newsletter in February. Is that Ed set the bar very, very high, and I don't think that there ever will be anyone that did everything that he did for this town, loved this town the way he did. I mean, he's a teacher, a leader, a mentor, a volunteer, a steward, an activist, and I am so grateful to have known him and to have known all of you, and I miss him greatly. I'll say that. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I do appreciate it.
Well, Brent, thank you, and thank you for your continued support of our Sharon Historical Society. It means a lot to everybody, and I know it meant a lot to Ed. Well, finally, let's hear from his sidekick and fellow New England cowboy, Barkley Prindle, his traveling mate and so close a friend. Barkley, good morning to you.
No way. I've got 3 words to sum everything up that I have to say. That's 3 words: adventure, adventure, adventure. And I'll tell you, it all started in high school. Ed wasn't teaching there yet, but he was our coach in baseball, basketball, and football, primarily baseball, which I was fortunate enough to be one of his players. And although I did sit on the bench quite a bit, he called me the best bench jockey in the league. Anyhow, speaking of adventures, primarily the Western trips we took from southeastern Utah, West Coast, San Francisco, and all that area out there. And I say adventure, but to me, it was a learning experience. And every place we went, I mean, I would learn something. And he was, as Liz Shapiro said, it was a great teacher. And boy, I learned so much from him as a teacher, not just a friend, but as a teacher. And it's always stuck with me. He had a way of teaching and presenting things, a hand-on situation. His modus operandi was. But to tie in the Western experiences, primarily every year we took a trip to the West Coast, and from there we rented a car and toured around the area. We didn't go last April, but we were planning a trip this April, and which of course is not going to materialize. And that is one thing I'm really, besides his friendship, I missed his trips with him. We fly out to the West Coast, tour around the area in the Sierras and so forth, gold country and what have you. And then we would take a train back. We both had an Amtrak card, which we accumulated enough points to come back first class all the way back to the East Coast. And that too was an adventure. And he loved trains, I loved trains. We had a lot of things in common with regards to that. But how this all tied in with Sharon too, the Colgate mansion was built by Romulus Riggs Colgate, and he was also the president of the Pacific Gas and Electric Company in California. And that was the tie into Sharon, and he knew all that history, and it was really great. But I mean, another person that was tied in with Sharon is the Frank Sprague, who now was occupied. The house is now occupied by Patrick and Modore on South Main Street. He was the inventor of the electric elevator for high-rise buildings. So he had all that history, gave me all that information, which all tied back into Sharon, and it was just an amazing adventure. Not in just the adventure in itself and raising hell, and well, we didn't really raise a lot of hell, but we toured a lot of places, and I call it raising hell. but that really, I mean, there's so much size to Ed Kirby that I enjoyed. Another one is, I'll round it up with this. Every Wednesday, we would go to lunch, and we couldn't eat lunch locally. We had to go like out of town, well, big town of Canaan. So we went to the Canaan Country Club every Wednesday, had lunch. We knew a lot of people there and so forth. And but coming home, we never went straight home. It was always a trip around the area, you know, something new. He wanted to take a photograph of this, that, and, you know, for his research and in his book. And I'll tell you, that in itself was every Wednesday was at noon was my adventure. I couldn't wait for that Wednesday to roll around. And what are we going to do next? And he would never tell me. It would be a surprise. But it was always something that was historically correct, geology-wise, personalities in the area that he would say who lived there, who lived here. And that to me was very, very dear to my heart. I'll miss that guy, as a lot of other folks will. And I'll tell you, he can't be replaced. And I guess they called me the last of the three amigos. It was Jack Mahoney, Ed Kirby, and myself would participate in these Western rendezvous and belong to the different chapters. The Wild West History Association, now it used to be the National Association for Outlaw and Lawman History, of which Ed Kirby was president for some time. I was vice president and so forth. So that held about 600 members around the country, and I miss those trips, and that was twice a year. In fact, he numbered our trips by, I think we're up to 88, 89 would have been this year if we had gone. But anyhow, I miss that guy, and will continue to do so for a long, long time. Well, thank you very much, and that's all I've got to say. I would like to say more and have more to say, but my time is up.
All right. Barclay Prindle, thank you so much. Also to Brent Colley and Liz Shapiro. Ed Kirby was somebody who did like to raise a little hell, didn't mind a little trouble, reminded me in a way, and you, Barkley, of his love of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He was in awe of them, and he had that same spirit you see in the movie. So finally, we're going to close out. Mary Kirby and Mo Dore have given Rhonda Schwartz a bunch of pictures that sort of catalogs Ed's life. And we put those pictures together with our great editor, Danny Hilton, to the music that is the final score, the closing credits of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, called Not Going Home Anymore. And here is that video. All right, let's hear now from Ed's daughter, Maureen Kirby Dore. Mo?
Thank you, Brian. That was really incredible. On behalf of my mom, Mary Kirby, my siblings, and Kevin, Kaki, and Ed, we thank you so much for this really amazing tribute. Thank you, Brian and Rhonda and Jonathan, for making that happen. And I think you mentioned somebody named Danny Hilton, who helped you as well. So thanks for that. Liz, I know you could have talked a long, long time about all those great memories and times and experiences you had with Dad, and you put a lot of content in a really short clip, and you did a great job. And I know he would be thrilled to have had you participate in all of this. And Brent, thanks for coming back and also sharing about, what Dad meant to you, and you get it, and you're a good student as well. Someone to always learn from him. That was his job first and foremost as an educator. He loved to teach. Barky, you were Dad's best friend. I know it's hard for you. Wednesdays are not the same. Train rides aren't going to be the same. I hope you'll take them. I know he hopes that you'll take them as well. But thanks so much. Dad had a great love for Sharon, as you all know, and he really loved teaching and he loved sharing his knowledge. And hopefully the work that he has done and the legacy he has left behind, that it will just continue to teach, all of us and all of those who come to Sharon and who want to know more about the town in which they live. So thank you so much for all of that.